Hi lovelies, welcome, it's Funto here. So today I'm going to be sharing my birth story, which is really exciting because I really enjoyed labour and I feel like it's a really positive story, which is why I want to share it to encourage anyone who is preparing and thinking about that there are good things that can happen in labour. So hopefully this will be helpful for you. Let's get into it. So I'm going to start actually the day before my labour started. So I gave birth on a Monday, and on the Sunday my house was full with family, and the only thing that I had felt at that point were a few, it felt like period cramps, and they started at like 5 a.m. on the Saturday, and I had researched it, and I know that people say cramping happens during pregnancy. It doesn't mean much. Some people experience Braxton Hicks, which I did not experience. So on the Monday, I noticed at around 5 a.m. again, I was experiencing these period-like cramps. So it's that really dull, achy feeling that you get around your lower abdomen, and it feels like a bit tight, a bit achy. It just makes you feel a bit weak and weary. So I was feeling that they were super mild. I could sleep through them. So even though I knew it was early morning, I was still asleep, and you know when you're half awake and you can kind of sense something going on, but I could sleep through them. Woke up at 9 a.m. as usual. I was fine. And the difference this time compared to the Saturday is that the feeling was still there. Totally like ignorable, so I was able to get up, I had a shower, I continued with my day, but undertones of it was still kind of there. So I was doing errands as normal and I felt fine for the most part, and things started to change around lunchtime. So I remember being sat on my sofa and I was just really uncomfortable. I just didn't want to sit on the sofa, and I didn't really want to have conversation either. I kind of just, I don't know, you know when you feel a little bit mopey. So I ended up going upstairs, and my husband was still working from home at the time. So I went upstairs and I just kind of just felt a bit mopey, and I put my head on his shoulder and I was just like, oh, I don't feel that great. And at this point I could still very much feel that cramping sensation. So I just kind of sat next to him. We have a sofa in that room. So he put some pillows at my back, put some pillows around me. I sat down next to him and I had a bit of a nap. And then by the time I'd woken up from my nap, I felt a bit better. I was chatting with him, still felt a bit achy. And I think for him at that point, alarm bells started to go off, and he was just like, do you think it could be anything to do with labour? And I'm the type of person where I don't like a fuss being made around me, especially if it's unnecessary. So I didn't want to get myself too worked up about it. Another thing that a lot of people also say is that first pregnancies, first births tend to be quite long and quite slow. So they do encourage you to take your time, be at home, go about your day, just because the process can be long and you don't want to elongate that or kind of put yourself in an anxious state. So I was like, you know what? I'm fine at home. And in my head, I was like, when I go into labour, I'm going to be at home, chill in the bath, relax, and just do as much of it at home as possible. So I was in that mind frame. And behind the scenes, my husband had started he'd leave the room and come back. And I didn't really know what he was doing, but what he was doing is he just gradually started to put things in the car because he just wanted to be ready just in case. And another thing that I had in mind that was making me think that it's not labour is that I still wasn't due for another 10 days. So I was early, very, very early. I was 38 weeks. So I was just not thinking about labour. About 2 o'clock, I noticed that the pace of these contractions started to increase, and I actually started to need to pause and breathe through them. They kind of were requiring a bit more of my focus, and I think that was a changing point for me. And I thought, you know what, let me just get out my app and start recording these just in case there is a pattern there. So what the hospital often advise is that if you're having contractions that are lasting for 1 minute and they are coming every 5 minutes. So there's 5 minutes between each contraction, and that pattern is sustained for 1 hour, then that's a sign that you should call your hospital, call your midwife, call your delivery department and let them know, and they'll assess the situation, and you're usually about that point ready to come into the hospital and you've begun the labour process. So what did contractions feel like? This was something that was really hard to pinpoint and I couldn't really imagine before labour, but for me they definitely did grow in intensity. Some people call them waves rather than calling them contractions, which I found really helpful because that's kind of the sensation. It kind of builds in intensity and then they taper off, and then there's a pause and a break between them. And for me it was very much that period cramping sensation. So it felt like tightening, it felt like cramping, and then there'd be a release. So my contractions carried on building up, and by around 3 o'clock, they started to show some sort of a pattern. So at this point, I'd kind of accepted, okay, this looks like early labour. So my husband picked up the phone, he called the hospital just to let them know that I was experiencing contractions, and they just told us to carry on recording them and call back again when they got to the point where they were coming every 5 minutes and they were lasting for 1 minute. So that's what we did. In terms of birthing positions, I was very much in a seated position, and I had pillows at my back propped up around me because that was just comfortable for me. So I very much just stayed in a position that was comfortable, and I got to a point where I just wanted some cuddles from my husband. So he ended up kneeling down in front of me, and I would cuddle him and we'd breathe together. And we'd previously done antenatal classes, so we had learned a breathing technique which was 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out. So it was really great to have done the classes with him, so he knew how to do the breathing techniques, and he'd remind me and breathe with me, which was really helpful. So we'd breathe together, and then I'd be able to carry on chatting, and that was fine. So I'd say it got to a point maybe around 5 o'clock, I would say, where I was really starting to feel the intensity of it, and I just wanted a sign that this was actually labour, because I still wasn't too sure. And I remember I just said like a prayer in my head, and I was like, God, just give me a sign. I need something to work with here. And within a couple of minutes, or in my head what felt like a couple of minutes, I'd gone to the bathroom and I lost my mucus plug. So if you don't know, it's literally what it says on the tin. It's really gross. It's basically a mucousy discharge with streaks of blood in it, and it happens at varying times of labour. It can happen before labour as well. Mine obviously happened during labour. So once I saw that, I was like, okay, well, this is getting real. This is definitely something. And then another symptom that I experienced also within a similar time frame was a really strong gagging reflex, and I hadn't actually felt nauseous at all during pregnancy. So I didn't have any morning sickness, which is a huge blessing, and I was really thankful for that. So this felt really weird, and it was a really strong sensation, which is also quite common in labour, where women do feel nauseous and sometimes they are sick. Thankfully, I wasn't sick. So I think it got to around 6 o'clock when we called the hospital again, and we noticed that the pattern had hit contractions that were lasting for definitely 1 minute. I couldn't talk through them anymore. They definitely required my attention to breathe through them and to be very focused through them. And so these were indications that this was early labour. And so we called the hospital and they said, you know what, it's up to you. You're definitely welcome to come. It does sound like early labour, so come when you're ready. Or if you would like to stay at home and do a bit more labouring at home, you're also welcome to do that. So we'd arrived at the hospital at around 7 p.m. And once we got to the hospital, they gave me a wheelchair. My husband raced down the corridor to get me to the birthing centre. So we gave birth to a birth centre, which was actually attached to the hospital. So it's a midwifery-led service. So I was attended to all by midwives, And it's also because it allows you to have a water birth, which I really wanted since I was going down the very natural route without any medication, and I know that water is meant to be really calming and help with labor pains. So I was looking forward to a water birth, but the pool wasn't ready yet, as they wait until you're in established labor before they put you in the pool. So the first thing they did was to check how far dilated I was. I did not enjoy this. I don't know if anyone else found checks down there difficult, but I hated the check. The check did not feel good. It just felt like someone poking around in there, and I had to lie down as well, which wasn't comfortable. It felt like a lot of pressure on my lower back when I was lying down. It didn't feel good. And when she did the check, I was actually 3 to 4 centimeters dilated. So definitely in early labor, which was a good sign and a relief that it wasn't all in my head and that I wasn't going to be sent home as well. I really didn't want to get to the hospital and be sent home. That's my baby crying. I'll be back. So in the birthing center, there were a few things that I did to manage my contractions. So the first thing that I did use was gas and air. So that's the primary form of pain relief that they offer in the birth center. And so it's like a little tube with a mouthpiece, and I don't think it subsided the pain that much. But what it did do, it just helped me to focus on my breathing, and it kind of made me feel a bit delirious, a bit spaced out, a bit calmer. So maybe I was like less focused on the intensity of what was happening. And it's also really weird because I'm trying to remember how bad was the pain, and I don't remember like excruciating pain or ever getting to a point where I felt like I can't do this. This is painful. This is too much. It just felt intense, if that makes sense. So yeah, it didn't feel like pain. It felt like lots of intensity. And at this point, the second we got to the birth center, we got into full gear. They had my birth preferences. And so we dimmed the lights, something I specified. So I wanted really dim lighting because for me, mood lighting is super calming. So dim lighting helped. And then also I had my husband kneeling down in front of me, and I was resting on his chest and on his shoulders. So birthing positions, I think, are really important for helping your labor progress. So leading up to my labor, I had done lots of squatting, lots of stretching. I used to be a dancer, so I love stretching anyway. So it was therapeutic for me and also very helpful for labor to prepare my hips and birth canal for all of that. And I thought that I would be in lots of different labor positions because this is said to help progress labor. But as it turns out, I didn't really want to move, which was really surprising for me. I also had a fan with me. I highly recommend one of these portable fans. This was great because even though I had a window open, sometimes I felt really hot. I'd have hot flushes. Sometimes I felt quite cold. So we went between having a t-shirt over me to keep me warm to having a fan on me to keep me cool. And I'd just be calling my husband like, I need the fan, I need the fan. I don't want the fan, I'm too cold. So he did great. He did really well. I also had this bottle with me. This is my labor bottle, which was really important to keep me hydrated. And I love it because it has a straw, which makes it really easy to use. So no matter what position I was in, it was easy to drink water. And the other thing that I tried for labor, which maybe not many people have heard of, but it's a comb. And this was actually fantastic. So how a comb works, it's kind of like acupressure, and you basically place it in the palm of your hand, and I would hold onto it and squeeze it every time I went through a contraction. And it's this weird thing where your brain actually registers the sensation of the pressure going through your hand before it registers the contraction. So it was just a bit of a weird sort of psychological, I don't know, I don't have the best explanation. If I can find a good explanation, I'll link it down below. But I have come across it in multiple places where women say it was really helpful for them in labor. And I got combs at the time and put them in my hospital bag just so that I could try it. And it did something for me. It kind of worked. Let me know if you've ever tried it or if you've heard of it. But I would recommend giving it a go. So those are the main things that I used, and The biggest thing I would say that helped me was the breathing. We absolutely had to breathe through everything. Right, so I have my hospital notes here with me to give an accurate timeline. So early labour was at home. That was from about 1 p.m. till 7 p.m. 7 p.m. is when we got to the hospital, and that was the start of active labour. And that's when I was first checked, and I was 3 to 4 centimetres dilated, which is active labour. And then my membranes ruptured, which means my waters broke, at 8:30. So an hour and a half into active labour, my waters broke. So you're probably thinking,
Fonto, I thought you were having a water bath. There's no water.
Yes, this is the water. So basically, in active labour, it got to a point where my midwife said to me, the pool is ready, it's warm, it's at the right temperature. When you're ready to jump in, go for it, hop in. And I just did not want to move. I wanted to be back in my seated position, husband in front of me, leaning on him. It was working. If it ain't broke. So by 8:30, it got to a point where the midwife spoke to me and she was like, we've noticed you actually haven't been to the bathroom at all since you've been in the hospital. And they were concerned that I was getting dehydrated. So I had packed water, as I'd mentioned. I'd also packed some Lucozade just to give me some electrolytes and a little bit of energy. And I was drinking them, but I think I was so focused on labouring that I hadn't gone to the bathroom. I'd also packed a few cereal bars and snacks with me to keep me going. I ended up not eating at all during labour, but I think I was just so in the zone that I didn't take a moment to pause and think about those needs. So with some prompting, they said, right, just try and go to the bathroom. We want to make sure you're getting enough fluid in you and make sure you have a couple more drinks as well. So by the time I'd gone to the bathroom, and as I was just making my way out, there was just like and lots of warm water, kind of cinema style, gushing, and my waters broke. And I was like, that's where they are. I can't remember a ton. I just feel like it was really quick and it was definitely warm. So lots of warm fluid just kind of went everywhere. And I feel like when my membranes ruptured, that's where everything just picked up pace and picked up intensity. So I waddled back to my seating position. Husband is still on his knees, bless him. At this point, his socks are also covered in all sorts of wetness. Birthing partners, just a big shout out to you guys. You do a lot of work and it ain't pretty. So 8:30, my main membranes were ruptured and my baby was delivered at 8:42 p.m. So 15 minutes, just about 15 minutes between my waters breaking and her flying out. So I remember that at that point, everything picked up intensity and they also started to shift my position a little bit. And what happened was, I just remember like they kept asking me, if you feel any changes in sensations, if you feel any intense pressure down below, then let us know. That could be a sign that the baby's head is on the way. And it got to a point where I just felt like everything head south. I can't explain it, but it was just, everything just moved south. And I think that must have been the point where I was crowning. I don't remember feeling the ring of fire, which a lot of people say is when you are crowning and you feel like the stretching of skin and it feels like burning. I don't remember feeling that. I just remember everything just kind of moving. And when you know, your body just kind of does its thing and it's so incredible. And I felt a really strong urge to push. And that was the first time I felt the urge to push. And they were telling me, like, once you feel that urge, let us know and we start to get into gear. So I felt that strong urge and I just started to scream my head off. I think for the most part during labour, I tried to be really controlled with my breathing because that actually helps to control the intensity that you're feeling. Whereas when you keep your moans quite low and centered and you focus on the breathing, it helps your body to control and engage with the process. So I was very much trying to do that. Obviously a few yelps here and there because you do what you've got to do. But I remember at this point is where it was just like, I was just freaking out, and the midwife had to come to me and calm me down. And she was like, listen, you need to calm down. So she was like, you need to hear me. It's really important. You need to listen to me. Breathe, calm down. So I remember just going really quiet, and they started to get into position. She got down in front of me, and she very much told me to push when I felt the urge to. And it's such a bizarre thing, because I know people say that like your body just knows what it's doing. And I kept telling myself that, but not really realizing what it meant until it was happening. And I would just feel these really big, I want to say they are contractions. I'd feel a contraction, and it felt like everything was squeezing and pushing her out. So I just kind of went with that, took in a big deep breath, and I would push on those contractions. So I think on the first one is when her head popped out, and I remember there just being a real moment of quietness. And they very much encouraged me to try and push only on the contractions. And this is to help control tearing. And it's just said to help. And in my case, it did help. I didn't tear. So that was what I very much tried to do. I listened to my midwives. And so I was just breathing. And then I felt another surge, another contraction. And on that contraction, she came flying out. And there she was. And it was really amazing. I think this is where the euphoria kicks in, and it's just a really incredible couple of moments where it was like, firstly, the realization that she was born, and the midwives were just like, well done, you've done it. And I think it's obviously they realized before I did. I think it took me a while to realize, like, I've given birth and my baby is here. And I tried to dream of the moment so many times, picture it. What's it going to be like? What's she going to be like? What's she going to look like? How's it going to be to meet her? I just tried to picture it so many times, and I just couldn't. So for it to actually happen was like, it was just really, really incredible and really euphoric. And they put her straight into my arms, and I remember holding her, and I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, she's here. So a few tips to encourage a positive labour experience. I would say the first thing is to be prepared as much as possible. So the first thing I did was packing my hospital bags early, and I started buying everything from the start of my third trimester, and then putting things in the bags and into sandwich bags, containers, labeling things, washing baby's clothes, all of those knickknacks I started to do from like 4 weeks to my due date. And I'm really thankful that everything was packed and ready to go by the front door at least a good 2 to 3 weeks ahead of my delivery, because she came 10 days early. I also say spending some time thinking about your birth plan. In your hospital notes, there's actually a section in them that allows you to prepare for your birth plan. And while it's good to plan, obviously it's good to be open to things changing. So one of the reasons why I chose a birth centre was that if anything were to happen and change where I needed medical intervention or medical help, I knew that I was next to the actual labour ward in the hospital, and I could get medical care as much as possible. So I was in the mind frame that I was willing for things to change, but I had my preferences noted. I'd say another tip that really helped me was the breathing. As I mentioned, it was the main thing we used to progress through labour. And also my mindset. I did write down some affirmations, and I did research some birth affirmations. And while I didn't play them at the time or play music because everything was just so quick, I didn't even have time for that. In my mind, I made sure that I never told myself I can't do this. I tried never to get to a point where I was in despair, and I tried to be like, Fonto, you've got this, and like just telling myself, you've got this, you're doing this, it's progressing, you're fine. Those kind of things, trying to shape my mind. And I think those are things you can actually do ahead of labour to try and prepare yourself and calm yourself so you go into it with as little anxiety as possible. I also packed snacks and drinks, so this was helpful for during labour, although I didn't eat that much. It was also really helpful immediately after labour because I was definitely hungry. I hadn't eaten since 1 p.m. and I'd given birth in the evening around 8 p.m. So by the time I was washed and ready and settled, it was like 10 o'clock in the evening. So we ordered some delivery, but we also had lots of snacks to keep us going in the meantime as well, which was helpful and comforting. The hospital do provide food, but I just found I wanted that extra bit of comfort of choosing the kinds of food that I wanted as well. I would also say a really important tip is to make sure that you speak up and speak out about your needs, and to have a birth partner that's able to do so. So fortunately, I feel like my birth team were really, really good. They listened to me. They were very kind and gentle. They were super, super patient, really lovely. And yeah, I guess I was lucky in a sense, but I do know that there are other women, particularly women of colour, ethnic minorities and black women, who have found that they didn't feel that they were heard or listened to, or that their claims were taken very seriously. So this was something I'd actually worked with a midwife with in advance, and she was the leading midwife in our area, and she was also championing better birth experience for black women and ethnic minorities. So this is something that I definitely took some time to break down my birth preferences to my husband. We spoke a lot about labour and what we'd do if certain things happened and how we should approach it. And so he was very aware to speak on my behalf and make sure that my needs were heard and taken care of. If you feel uncomfortable, if you feel you're in pain, if you feel you need something, if you feel something isn't right, do speak up. Don't be afraid to pester them. It is kind of a life and death situation. Your baby's life and your life is really important. So don't be scared to speak up about your needs. Take your needs and your concerns very seriously. You're not being pedantic. And even if you are, if ever there was a time to be pedantic, it's now. You're giving birth and bringing life into this world. Be pedantic and make sure that your needs are heard. So that's it for my labour and delivery story. I do hope that was helpful for you if you're curious, and if you're about to give birth soon, good luck. You've got this. I wish you all the best of luck. Pop any questions that you have down below and give this a thumbs up if you did find it helpful. And I do hope you consider subscribing to stick around for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.